Rachel.
I'm Nikki and we're the Stitch Sisters.
Now, if this is the first time that you found our channel, we make videos all about sewing, fashion, style and DIY. So if this is your kind of thing, then make sure you click on the little subscribe button below. And if you want to get notifications of all our videos, click the bell too.
This video is a little continuation from our What We Love This Week, inspired by episode 3 of the Sewing Bee, which was 70's week.
Yes, our absolute favourite so far.
We decided that we would raid Rachel's 70's patterns and that we would each make a dress.
So as those of you who have a pattern stash with vintage patterns in it will know, just because you have a lot of them doesn't mean that many of them fit you. And it's literally about 10 in total in mine that fit me. And Nikki and I chose 2 of them.
Yes.
I keep the other ones because I just like the designs and I have this idea in my head that at some point I'll grade them up.
Grade them all.
But I've had a couple of questions actually on Instagram from people asking about sizing for vintage patterns, and what I tend to do, there's no real secret to it, is I look for patterns that have lots of ease so that I can fit within the finished garment measurements comfortably.
Like your dress today.
Like the one today, which has more ease than you could possibly imagine. Let me just stand up and show you briefly.
You could get 2 small children under there, if not more.
This is a trapeze dress and it is absolutely huge. So clearly I didn't need to worry too much about the fit on the bust, waist or hips, but I did still need to make sure that the shoulders would fit me and the armhole would fit me. A vintage size 14, which this one is actually pretty good for me around the arms and the shoulders.
Yeah. Mine was a 14 and a half. Half size.
I know.
It's
a whole different time.
It's just weird. Anyway, mine is jersey, so it was a jersey dress, and there was ease in it, so I knew that it would fit me, and I fitted within, within the range of sizes anyway, so it was absolutely fine.
Yes.
It's such a comfortable dress, I have to say, and it's my first vintage pattern. I've never sewn a vintage pattern before.
I'm so proud. Well, tell us, for the people who haven't yet sewn a vintage pattern, because I think there'll be a lot more people in your position than in mine. So tell us what your thoughts were. How did you find it different? Did you enjoy it?
I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it very much. I put my own spin on it, so I used a very modern scuba fabric instead of a jersey. So that has its benefits, but it also made some things tricky. The pattern itself was already pre-cut, and is that a normal thing with one size patterns?
It can be, yeah. I mean, it's unusual for 70's, but most of mine are second hand, which means that it's probably just that somebody had cut it out.
Okay.
But the key thing about it is that most of the patterns are single size.
Yes.
So your pattern was specifically for a 14 and a half, not even a 14. And so you had one in there. So it used to be traditional that they would just, rather than actually just print the outlines on, they would just cut them out.
Yes.
And as patterns as late as the 60's, you often find them cut out the majority of the time. But by 70's, most of them were coming on a big sheet that you then cut out yourself.
Okay. And it, it was very simple. There was 2 sleeves. There was the front. There was the back. There was the belt, and then there was the little bit that comes around the collar.
Yeah, the keyhole.
And the keyhole, and there was the collar stand, or the band around the top, and that was it. So it was fairly simple with the amount of
raglan
pieces.
sleeve always means it's going to be a relatively simple construction, doesn't it?
A raglan sleeve that was that wide, and has a dart in the top as well, which was really lovely. Yeah,
raglan sleeves with darts on top is always the sign, I think, of good shaping, because it means it's just going to hug your shoulder a lot better and give you a curve rather than a straight.
It feels really nice. It feels like it's shaped, which it is. That's what's happened.
And I think because that helps the sleeve have more of a 3D shape, it usually means that the fit under the arm, where you have the diagonal seam that runs from the neckline to under the arm, that usually hugs your body a bit better as well, because the sleeve is actually curved rather than sitting flat. Yeah,
but other than that, it was very similar to the commercial patterns that we have these days.
Yeah.
The instructions were kind of, I was kind of going on automatic pilot, because I'm thinking, it's a raglan, I know what I'm doing, there's a front, there's a back, I know where the bits go.
Yeah.
But I did make sure I read the instructions and everything as I went.
I always think it's wise to read vintage patterns, because it doesn't matter if you can figure out the construction yourself. There's a different way of explaining things, and I always find that each pattern teaches me something.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just a a different way of doing things, not necessarily a better way, so I'll probably stick to what I already know. But sometimes you get some genius little ideas in there, and you just think to yourself, well, how has that got lost over time? Why isn't everyone doing this?
I think if anything, it may have been simpler instructions.
Yes.
So I think the wording might have been clearer. Because I know a lot of people struggle with modern commercial patterns, that the way that they explain things, it just, you have to read it 5 times before you understand what it means. But it seemed like it was just, maybe it was because it was a simple dress.
I think it is. I think
there
it's
wasn't
because
anything
the
too
steps
complex.
themselves are relatively simple. I think often when people struggle with understanding the diagrams and the instructions on commercial patterns, it's to do with how much experience they've got of sewing them, and also on the more complex patterns sometimes the diagrams aren't very clear, so you can't really see which one's the right side. They're trying to show you notches, but they're not always particularly clear. You don't know which way around the piece is, and whether you've got it on the top side or the underside, and all those kind of things. But for anybody that's interested, our next class coming on our online classes is actually going to be a guide to using what we call commercial patterns. But by that we mean the big 4 or the big 7 as they're now called. Simplicity, New Look, Burda, Butterick, Vogue, McCall's, all of those. We've had lots of feedback from people that say that they love the idea of them, but they really struggle to get them fit right. So we're going to walk you through from the very beginning, if you're completely new to using them, what everything on the envelope, in the envelope means, but most importantly, how to find the right size with the right amount of ease for you, and how to blend between sizes if you don't fit into one category.
And lots of little tips to how to take the fear out of them as well. So you don't need to be scared. They're absolutely fine. You will make something and it will be wonderful. But just giving you little tips along the way to take the scariness away.
Yes. So speaking of blending sizes, that's probably the only downside to your single size pattern. Is that if you hadn't have fit all of your body measurements into that size.
Or if I wasn't using stretchy jersey.
Lots of people like to just be able to blend between one size and a bigger or smaller one. And if you don't have that on the paper, then it means that you have to decide exactly how much extra that you need to add. So,
and where.
That can make it a little bit more tricky. But I'm so pleased you enjoyed it. Show everybody what you did with your cuff, because that was a little...
I made my cuff like this. So I've got a very wide cuff. The bottom of the cuff was the bottom of the sleeve was about this wide. And what it wanted me to do was to gather it. So put a couple of lines of gathering stitches. There was supposed to be an opening, and then there was supposed to be a small band with a button, like the band around the collar,
like mine.
a bit like Rachel's, but tiny, like this big. But the scuba did not like being gathered, being all gathered up, and then having this really tiny little band going around it. And I couldn't get the scuba to go over it. And this scuba, although it's absolutely beautiful and from Fabworks, it's one of those, if you stretch, I can't pull it because I'm with my arm, but if you stretch it, it goes white.
Oh yeah.
So I needed to be very careful not to kind of bruise it as I was, or stretch it too much. But Fabworks did warn us about it, and it is in the description on the fabric itself when you look at it. And I knew it would be fine because it's not a tight, I'm not making a bodycon dress. It's not going to be stretched around me. I knew there was going to be some drape, and this is quite a lightweight scuba. So in the end, what I did is I cut off the band that I put on that was horrendous. So I just cut it off, evened everything back up again, and then I created a cuff, but I wanted to make it really long and I didn't have much fabric left, so I basically used the biggest piece of scrap I had left and cut 2 cuffs, and then I gathered the sleeves just as it told me. I sewed up the keyhole piece, and then I just attached the cuff to the sleeve. And I love the sleeves.
I think it looks great, and that's the great thing about using a stretch fabric is you can do things like that. You could have just stuck on a neckband like you would do you know, a sweatshirt neckband and cuffs like you would do a sweatshirt, and it will work just fine.
But me hacking, I was hacking it.
I'm hacking making vintage patterns and hacking. It's just like, it's brilliant.
The other tricky bit was the this keyhole part, because it gets you to put a little placket on, and then you sew around it, and then you cut it and flip it to the other side. Now it asks you to hem it all the way around in this curve, which the scuba was just going, no, I don't press. I'm not going to do that. So in the end, what I did is I just had to hand stitch it around. There was no way it was going to sit flat. I also used our magic tape
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah,
I used
that's
the
always
sticky tape to stick it down enough that I could keep it flat. It's not the tidiest thing, it's not perfect, but the scuba was tricky. But I love it anyway.
Yeah.
And then your beautiful stripy
tent dress.
Tent dress.
So let me just sit up a little bit so you can see this ginormous collar, which is just huge.
I sometimes wear very long earrings, and if I turn my head too quickly, I knock myself in the teeth with them.
Yeah,
and that's the kind of thing. If the wind caught you, you might slap yourself in the face with your collar.
Yeah, sure. So I had similar issues with my collar because the fabric that I've used is actually an acrylic that is actually from the 70s.
Yeah.
So acrylic, as you know, if you've got acrylic jumpers or sweatshirts, is kind of like wool, or it's a synthetic that's made to look like wool. So if I hold my sleeve up close, you can probably see it's got these almost like hairy bits on it. I bought this off of eBay a while ago, and it was one of those, often with vintage fabrics, they're not described very well, and I was just drawn to the stripes. I just absolutely loved the stripes.
Different widths is lovely.
And they were offering, I think it might have been £10 for like 5 or 4 meters or something like that.
Wow.
So clearly I had to have it, and it's been in my stash for ages, not knowing what to do with it. And when I decided on this dress pattern, so I picked a style pattern. It's 3872, and I made this version here in the middle. So when I decided that, and I could see that it had this centre seam that's almost, and this yoke at the top, this cross there, I thought, well, that's going to be really fun to play with stripes. And so that's what I did.
Yeah.
So I ended up cutting the collar on the bias just because I didn't want it to, I wanted the stripes to be going in a different direction to the yoke. Ideally what I would have done is to have this yoke portion here going horizontally, because that would have created even more interest in the stripe. But there is actually a tiny bit of stretch in this, and I didn't want the seam to end up lower down, so I ended up just going vertical. And then I've got this pattern matched V on the front. It's really annoying because the fabric, obviously I've washed it, but it's really old and I don't know what's happened to it. And it has areas where it's distorted. And I found that steam wasn't really making any difference at all. So what annoyed me about the pattern matching is it's perfectly pattern matched most of the way, but then it gets to a point just here where it's slightly off, and I unpicked it and redid it a few times, but it was twisting the seam.
That's such a sore thing, honestly.
I know, but we all do it, don't we?
But it's gorgeous.
It was puckering the seam, so I just had to go with
I
it.
can't see what she's seeing.
Well,
it's probably off by a millimetre.
I'm doing what all sewers do, and I'm pointing it out.
But it doesn't need to be pointed out, it's beautiful.
I was going really well and having everything perfectly mirrored and matched. You can see my yoke is, the stripe is matched, is mirrored, and it is on the collar. But then when it came to the sleeves, I just didn't have enough fabric left to be able to cut 2 mirrored sleeves. So the stripes are different on the sleeves, but they're matching on the cuffs.
Yeah.
So
There's
I had
so
a bit
much
of fun
to
with
the
that.
sleeve anyway that I don't think you would notice. I don't think it's essential. It would be more prominent if it had been wrong on the front or something like that.
Yes.
So I think you get away
but
with
going
it.
back to the collar, I had a little bit of an issue with that because it is quite a thick fabric. It's really bulky. You can't really press it. I have graded all the seams, but this is one of those collars where you stitch on one layer of the collar and then you just hand stitch the other side, enclosing the seam. So here at the point and then at the back of the collar, getting all of those seams and hems and everything to be graded and sitting nicely and hand sewing, it took a little bit of time. And I didn't do it till last night. I finished the dress ages ago and it's been sat on my mannequin, and I finished it at about 11 o'clock last night, and I just kept thinking to myself, oh, if Nikki could see me now, I'd be in trouble. But yeah, I'm really happy with it in the end. I like the fact that it's got this little puff on top of the sleeve,
so cute.
Which just means that the fullness of the sleeve is all, you just ease it in a smaller it's more gathering, I suppose, than easing, just in a smaller area, so you get a little bit of poof at the top rather than spreading it right across the.
But that's so on trend as well at the moment, isn't it? So.
Yes, and as you can see, it's a very important part of the pattern because she's got a little bit of poof on the top of hers as well. And then the cuffs was another tricky area for the same reason, because you sew it on one side and then you hand sew the raw edges in, and these gathered seams here were so bulky, so they obviously had to be trimmed down. And then when we were on our shopping trip yesterday and on other stories, I tried on a beautiful dress and it was a 70s dress with a big sleeve like this, and it had a popper to do up the cuff.
Yay.
And
So
then last
poppers it
night
is.
when I realised that I hadn't done the buttonholes either, and I'm thinking this fabric's going to be an absolute nightmare for buttonholes, and then I thought,
poppers.
sew a popper on.
It's much more, you know, it's much more easy to wear then, isn't it? Because I know we struggle
think
with
so,
buttons on your cuffs and stuff.
Yeah, but I knew I would have really struggled to get a decent buttonhole in all that bulk. There's quite a lot of seams in there, and
yes.
yeah. So all in all, I'm very happy with it.
Love
Can I
them.
tell you a little secret?
Always.
I haven't hemmed it. So acrylic doesn't fray. Or at least
fabulous.
this one doesn't.
Yes.
And I was thinking about how, because it's a very curved hem.
Yeah.
I was thinking about how I could hem it, but it still left lots of movement in the dress because it's so oversized. It needs to be able to sway and move. And if I'd have put a hem on it, I was a bit worried it was going to just stand out.
Yeah.
And look like I've got a hoop skirt on underneath.
You've got braid in it or something.
And yeah, so I decided in the end that I was just going to leave it raw.
Yeah.
So I'll hold it up so you can see, but there you go. It's completely
Just a raw
raw
edge.
Yeah. And then the other thing that I had to do is I could have overlocked the seams, but I didn't have the right colour thread in my overlocker and I couldn't be bothered, to be honest. But also I couldn't press them. This fabric takes a press, but it just doesn't really do anything. So what I did instead is all of my seams have been opened out and have a double row of top stitching, one either side of the seam, just holding the seam open.
I love that.
So it means that I've got stitching here and everywhere else. And I've top stitched all the way around the collar.
I want to make one now. There's a lot of top stitching in it.
But yeah, I mean, I love it, and I will make another one.
Yeah, I would make another one of these because I've been so comfortable in it all day.
Yeah.
And I feel kind of, I don't know, it's weird because I feel kind of retro but really stylish at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think because the 70s is so in fashion and because it's a modern fabric, it's kind of, I've got that juxtaposition.
Yeah.
And it doesn't, I don't feel like I'm dressing up. And I didn't want it to feel like that. I didn't want it to feel like I was dressing up in the 70s. I wanted it to be something that I would wear.
Yeah, well, how
And
many
it is.
secret pyjamas are that glam?
Oh gosh, it's so comfy.
It is though, isn't it? It's
It
secret
is secret
pyjamas, any
pyjamas.
kind of jersey dress. And this isn't quite so secret because it looks like a nightie. So we would love to know from you, do you like seeing us make vintage patterns?
Yeah.
Obviously...
Can we do 80s next?
Yes, we've got 80s, we've got 90s, we've got 60s, and we'd be more than happy to go through all the genres and find different patterns.
I've always wanted to make a flapper dress.
We'll start at the 20s then, shall we? But what we're wondering is, do you prefer it when our pattern reviews are something that you can recreate, i.e. a pattern that you can go and buy?
Yes.
Or do you like seeing the more vintage thing where you might not be able to get the exact same pattern, but you might be able to go and find something similar on Etsy or eBay or in a charity shop. Just a jumping off point.
Yeah.
So let us know in the comments below if you'd like to see more. Clearly we're not going to start doing all vintage pattern reviews. There'll be plenty of other ones.
There's definitely more modern stuff coming.
But we'd be more than happy to do more if that's what you'd like to see.
Yes. So, Prancy Pictures, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.